Chapter 2 of The Beginning Was the End by Oscar Kiss Merth. Translated by Judith Hayward. Chapter 2 The Collapse of a Theory. Man perceived that his forebears were hominid apes. He tries to explain his formation on the basis of the theory of natural evolution. But human development is a contradiction to cosmic order. It was set in motion by man's own sinful interference and produced physical defects dangerous to his existence and an oversized sick brain, which made his self-destruction appear to be progress. Proof that man is descended from the ape, or as man prefers to put it, from an ape-like creature, is more than sufficient, especially in the last 2 decades. So many fossils of the bones of early man have been found that an unbroken chain can be established going back more than 1,000,000 years. The older these remains are, the more the appearance of man gives way to the form of an ape. Reliable research showed that the process of human development began over 1,000,000 years ago, and in any case, not later than 700,000 years ago. Whenever human development began, it is a fact that 400,000 years ago, man was already very like he is today in outward appearance. That means that in biological terms, this unique development from ape to man took place in an exceptionally short time, and no satisfactory explanation for this has yet been given. More important than the question of when human development began are the questions why and how this process took place. A further question is, where are the fossilized bones of those apes from which man later developed? It is true that a fair number of ape remains have been found in which the process of human development can already be recognized, but no remains have been found of any apes of which man can say with certainty that these are the forebears of later man. The majority of bone fossils belonging to creatures already manifesting human traits and producing tools were found in Southeast Africa, principally in the Olduvai Gorge. Later on, they found in this same place fossils of the same breeds, but with the skull's bone structure, jaws, and teeth showing small divergencies. The fossils of apes, which had not yet started on the process of human development, that is to say, they did not use tools. With seeming logic, it was concluded that these apes had lived some hundreds of thousands of years earlier, and that they were the primitive ancestors of the tool-producing ape man. Great was the astonishment when it had to be admitted, in the face of unequivocal proof, that both the tool-making creatures and their non-tool producing supposed ancestors lived not only in the same place, but at the same time. This flatly contradicts the theory of natural evolution. For if some natural reason a breed of ape became embarked upon a process of development leading towards man, then all members of that breed who lived at the same time in the same geographical place would have to undergo the same process. It is not consistent with natural evolution that a section of the breed should suddenly begin a rocket-like ascent towards human development, become clever and produce tools, while the remaining section, living at the same time, in the same place, remains ape and does no more than look on in astonishment. Strange to tell, the apes which did not produce tools disappeared without trace, while the others continued to further their development. Did the former die out because they were not clever enough to keep themselves alive? Does that mean you have to become human to avoid extinction? Then how is it that other breeds of ape, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans among them, have not become extinct? Then there were other similar complications which made the situation even more confusing. In Southeast Asia, the fossilized bones of another breed of ape have been found, especially on the island of Java. And this breed also shows the characteristics of human development, and they too produced tools. Here too, remains of a type of ape very similar to the tool-producing ape were found. They produced no tools, so that it was supposed here that these were the forebears of tool-making ape. But it was shown in this case as well that both the tool-producing ape men and their supposed forebears had lived at the same time and in the same place. Here too, as yet unable to produce tools, disappeared without trace in a surprisingly short space of time. In other words, the riddle confronting people in Africa was repeated in Southeast Asia. And what is even stranger, this African and Javanese hominids were not of the same breed. And between the two groups there is the Indian Ocean, which extends many thousands of miles. Was it to be taken that the wonder thereby man came into being, the causes for which have not been explained up to now, took place twice, at the same time, and at two widely separated points on the Earth's surface? And even among two breeds of ape which were not related to one another. How could it be that both these so different breeds developed into Homo sapiens, independently of each other and yet along parallel lines and in the same direction? And above all, how could it be that in both areas, both breeds of hominid ape were divided into two groups inhabiting the same territory, with one half still living unequivocally as apes, while the other had already set out on the path leading to human development, and were producing tools? Scholars cannot explain all these strange phenomena, because all this is inconsistent with natural development, which they want to prove at all costs. They keep quiet about it. Against this scrupulously exact measurements of bones and teeth are carried out, and the tiniest details are gone into with the greatest enthusiasm. But the decisive phenomena were always left out of account if they were not in accordance with natural development and did not therefore fit into the prefabricated concept. The most decisive question concerning development from ape to man is, what were the causes which set the process of human development in motion? And why did these not operate on all other anthropoid great apes, living at the same time and in the same territories as the ape forebears of man? The evolutionary history of all breeds of hominoid ape is known to us through finds going back about 20 million years. We now know that they were very similar in form and in their way of life, and developed slowly in the course of millions of years within the framework of natural evolution. Without any one of these breeds making dramatic progress. Apart from that, we also know that about 1 million years ago, all breeds of hominoid ape had roughly the same skull capacity, about 400 to 500 cubic centimeters. There was no super race among them with special abilities. The intelligence level of all of them was approximately the same, and was sufficient to allow them to fulfill the conditions basic to continued healthy existence. All hominoid apes still in existence today, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, have remained at nearly the same stage of development as 1 million years ago. They altered within the bounds of natural development just as slowly as they had in the preceding 20 million years. Over 1 million years, the capacity of their skulls grew by only about 5%, and their intelligence too presumably rose only proportionately. There was only one unexplained exception. 1 million years ago, one type of hominoid ape, the identity of which has not yet been ascertained, started on a steep upward climb. The brain and the intelligence of these apes grew with a speed which is unique and unparalleled in the whole history of nature. While the brain of this breed grew from about 400 cubic centimeters to an average of 1,400 cubic centimeters, i.e. by 350% over the last 1 million years. Intelligence and memory increased 100-fold, or even 1,000-fold. And this enormous difference between brain growth and increase in intelligence is also an occurrence unique in nature and contrary to all rules governing natural evolution. This is rightly regarded as a puzzling phenomenon of nature, and understandably man tries to explain this marvel which befell none other than himself. Equally understandably, he tries to present this development as natural. If he succeeds, then he can explain not only his beginnings, but also his actions and goals as being in accordance with nature, i.e., at one with divine order. He could, by the same token, put an end to his growing doubts concerning the rightness of his own endeavors, which he calls progress. Even scholars and scientists try at all costs to present this singular phenomenon as a natural development, acting therein more under pressure from the subconscious than consciously speculating without preconception. This tendency is supported by the church's theologians. They are trying desperately to fuse the theory of natural evolution from ape to man with religious dogmas in such a way as to leave untouched a divine will, and with it a special place for man. Scholars and churches are, moreover, supported in their efforts by so-called officialdom and can proclaim the most utter nonsense without contradiction, as long as their pearls of wisdom, spiced with incomprehensible foreign words, sound scientific and argue in favor of natural evolution. Under these influences, the commonly accepted theory concerning the origin of man, which is as popular as it is naive, came into being. According to this, the forebears of man were hominoid apes. They lived in the forest where their closest relatives, anthropoid apes, still in existence today, lived and still do live. Through an alteration in climate, the forest disappeared and turned into prairie. This new environment our ancestors were exposed to. Many new dangers which they were unable to cope with. Animals of prey lurked in the tall grass, but more important still, their daily food was concealed by the upsurge of grass. This circumstance compelled them to get up on their hind legs and walk upright. Thus, they could see their enemies better and find their food more easily in the grasslands. And they were able to run faster like this too, if they were being chased by wild animals, or if they themselves were hunting animals. Only after they had learnt to walk and stand on their hind legs did their hands become free. This allowed them to take things in their hands and examine and observe them, and so manipulate them. They acquired the ability to think abstractly and began to shape things to serve their purposes. Thus, they made the first primitive tools and weapons, and so became superior to the animals. They became hunters and were able to feed better and use animal skins to clothe themselves. The use of weapons and tools gave them further ideas and inspirations, and increased their thinking capacity, and they were able to produce increasingly complicated objects. Along with their intelligence, their feeling of social duty grew and caused the gradual formation of the closed family. They were continually forced to solve new problems by the constantly changing and rising demands which were being created at any given time by their improved way of life. This again furthered the intelligence and led to new inventions. This process has supposedly run its course as sort of a chain reaction, which is the stuff of real progress. Added to this, there were the unusual evolutionary factors such as natural selection and adaptation to the demands of the environment. And they were continually making man cleverer, healthier, and more morally responsible and better. This so scientifically and subtly reasoned process was supposed to show that an ape turned into Homo sapiens, a mentally and physically healthy creature, highly developed morally. Homo sapiens, who can annihilate his fellow men with atom bombs and shoots at heavenly bodies with rockets. This theory is a collection of contradictions, which it is easier to refute than to invent. It is certainly simpler to believe that God, who suddenly conjured up the universe and all other living creatures by one simple command, had to knead man out of the earth with his own hands, because his outstanding skills had already been exhausted. It is certain that man's ape forebears lived in the forest, not alone, however, but with all similar anthropoid apes which still live there today. If the forest disappeared because of the climate, then it did not disappear only for those apes which were later to become man, but for all the others too. But then all apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, too, would find themselves on grassy plains. If one breed of ape was driven by fear of wild animals, and in order to find food more easily, to get up on its hind legs, Why did the other apes not get on their hind legs too for the same reasons? Was only one single breed so fearful or so clever? If walking upright was a means of movement crucial to continued existence and the preservation of life, and it was not acquired by the other apes, why were these not exterminated by wild animals? Why did they not die of hunger? Is their food as their food too was presumably hidden by the tall grass? And what kind of grass is that? What kind of grass is it that these scientists have planted here? Grass which was exactly at the eye level of a hominid ape standing upright. Apes varied from over 3 feet to over 5 feet in height. This ideal grass would then have to match the eye level of whatever it happened to be, as there would otherwise have been no sense in walking upright. Anyone who has ever seen a prairie knows that such a miracle prairie exists only in the imagination of some scholars. According to this theory, moreover, all forests must have dried up, as otherwise the apes would have retreated into the remaining forest land, and the theory of natural evolution could have been taken no further. In fact, during the last 1,000,000 years, there have been several alterations between the rainy and dry periods. But never did all forests dry up. Even in the driest period, there was more forest land on the earth than grassland. And all the apes would have been able to withdraw to the remaining forests to pursue their accustomed way of life there. Why did all other great apes do this, but for those from which man is said to have later developed? Did one breed of ape prefer to live on barren grassland during the alleged dry period, so that they might feed there among increased dangers? Or was it that the future Homo sapiens was not clever enough to withdraw into the remaining forests? Was then stupidity itself the point of departure for human development? Or has life on grassland advantages which attracted one breed of ape onto the prairies? Why then did the other great apes not profit from them? Or did dangers suddenly arise in the forest which caused some apes to flee from it, because they would not have been able to survive otherwise? How then did the other apes, which did not give up living in the forest, remain in existence? Many scholars affirm too that man was able to run faster because he went upright. Those who maintain that should be pursued some time by an angry gorilla. They would have to rewrite their books on the basis of their experiences. And they keep quiet about the fact that man, in walking upright, lost his ability to climb trees. If he learned how to walk upright because he was afraid of wild animals, then he acquired a wrong skill, and unlearnt one which he needed badly. For today he still laboriously climbs a tree when confronted with a wild boar, a rhinoceros, or a lion. And he would give a lot to be able to do so better and more quickly. If he lost this ability at the very time he most needed it, then that is not natural development or progress, but a loss. But even if this loss had to be explained as progress so that the theory of natural evolution fits, right from the very start of the official theory of evolution, right from the very start, the official theory of evolution is completely untenable. For this theory, based on wishful thinking, scholars had to invent an ideal dry period and miracle grasslands. They had also to design an ape which did not find its way in the tall grass, so that it could, in spite of its vegetarian way of life, kill a zebra with an axe, with the axe it made out of it. By a monstrous feat of imagination, they also succeeded in sending all apes, which were destined to remain apes, into the woods. And what connection is there supposed to be between free hands and increased intelligence? We know that hominoid apes were predominantly forest animals, and that they all, including man's forebears, had hands with which they could grasp and manipulate things. We know, too, that they spent at least 70% of their time in a sitting position, just as they do today. And when they did, they were free to use their hands. No single ape needed to stand up on its hind legs to be able to pick up objects in its hands. Quite the opposite. When apes stand up, they generally have to support themselves on their arms and are unable to hold anything in their hands. We know too that apes are curious animals and pick up and look at many objects, almost always in a sitting position. Their manual dexterity is so great that they can even catch fleas. and kill them. And if they possessed the necessary intelligence, they could all become watchmakers. You do not need to go to a university to learn this. You need only visit a zoo for an hour. It costs less too. In spite of these completely free and dexterous hands, not a single breed of ape had been stimulated in the course of the previous 20 million years to produce even the most primitive tool. So if free hands were supposed to cause cleverness and lead to tool production, why did this possibility lie dormant in all breeds of ape for 20 million years? And why is it still dormant in present-day great apes, even though they have free hands? Why should this effect of having free hands have come into play only about 1 million years ago? And only in the case of one single breed, that which later developed into man. Why not among the other great apes as well? 1 million years ago, they had just as big a brain as the forebears of man then possessed. Why did they not at least copy what they saw their relations doing? Is it perhaps because free hands alone are not sufficient for the acquisition of special thinking ability? Is it also necessary to walk upright? No, that will not do either. If an ape or a man has to carry out any mental work using a concentrated thought process, he tries, if possible, to do this in a sitting position, because concentrated thought is considerably easier than when walking or standing. For both activities use energy, and this curtails the energy supply of the body and of the brain too. And this impedes thought. Most of man's ideas, especially the more important among them, came into being while he was sitting or lying down. Gibbons are also members of the hominoid ape species. They sit a great deal, and what is more, when they walk in an upright position, with their hands completely free. And yet their intellectual abilities rest no further than those of the gorilla, which has to support himself when walking with his clenched hand. Quite the contrary, they were and remain on the lowest level of intelligence found among the anthropoid apes. Hence it follows that having free hands, walking upright, even the two together, do not lead to an increase in intelligence. Any such claim is a complete fabrication. What do the scholars say about hunting and eating meat? All hominoid apes were and are basically vegetarian. A few types of ape, mostly not anthropoid, occasionally eat worms, mice, and other small animals. Man's forebears were vegetarian too and became carnivorous only in the course of the process of human development. This happened about 1 million years ago, and what is more, it happened overnight, so to speak, without a long transitional period. Science regards this as a natural development, and flesh eating is supposed to have been a sign of increased intelligence and even progress, because man was able with meat to have a lighter and better diet. Wolves and wild cats give thanks for this compliment, as they were already carnivorous many millions of years earlier. What is supposed to be meant by saying that the vegetarian half-man or half-ape, by going over to eating meat, could have a better diet? Perhaps he was underfed before, but then on the same diet all other apes are not, and still are not right up to the present day, though they remained vegetarians. Why did they not die out a long time ago? Why are they 100 times healthier than any race of men? Unless they are living in a zoo. Or perhaps all animals that live as vegetarians are eating the wrong food supply because they are not intelligent enough to start eating meat? Does higher intelligence perforce bring flesh eating in its train? What level of intelligence would animals have to reach in the course of natural development for this to happen? When will cows start to bite? And when will elephants start eating meat? And why did it suddenly become easier for man's ancestors to feed themselves on meat? Since when has it been easier to kill a gazelle or a bison than to pick a piece of fruit from a tree? It is quite certain that all vegetarian breeds of animal were always able to solve their feeding problems without having to turn themselves into beasts of prey. Were man's ancestors not clever enough to do this? Then the changeover to flesh eating resulted not from cleverness, but from stupidity. How is it then that the very dullest apes have become men. Why then is the changeover to flesh eating said to have been a sign of higher intelligence? There were never compelling reasons for a breed of herbivorous apes to change over to being carnivorous, as some scientists maintain. On this earth, the supply of plants has always been greater than the supply of animals, and there have always been more herbivorous animals on the earth than carnivorous ones. If it were otherwise, there would certainly have been no animals left on Earth long ago. Today, the Earth has a population of 3,000 million people. And even they could still follow, and even they could still follow a completely vegetarian diet, although there is much less vegetation left nowadays than in earlier times. Several hundreds of millions of people do still today live as vegetarians. Not, however, because they are not intelligent enough or can find no meat, but because they have recognized a vegetarian diet as man's original one, which is in many ways beneficial. The changeover from eating plants to eating animals took place at the earliest stage of man's development, and in a very short space of time. Overnight, so to speak. This is an absolutely unnatural occurrence. It can have nothing to do either with natural evolution or with increased intelligence. All the theories mentioned are riddled with contradictions, and under the cloak of a dubious specialist language, they were offered for acceptance to a public that hungers for confirmation of man's divine mission, which it increasingly doubts. If previously current theories are not correct, what is the truth? If instead of looking for points of resemblance between ape and man, researchers had paid more attention to the most striking differences between them, they would probably have got further. Instead of this, they were always pleased when they found something more which men and apes have in common. The most revealing physical and mental differences are these. Anthropoid apes have a thick coat of hair, while man lost his in the process of turning into man. He was forced by this to use artificial clothing as a substitute, because otherwise he would have become extinct. Female mammals, including anthropoid apes, are so made that their time of ovulation and fertility can be recognized. During this estrus period, the female sex organ is discolored and enlarged, and secretes a fluid which gives off a scent,